Here we are at the Railroad Redoubt. We're on the back side of the Railroad Redoubt in the parking area, just the rear. You see the Texas monument up there, and as I alluded to in another video, all these Texas memorials at every battlefield are made out of the same kind of granite or marble. I'm sorry, I'm not an art history major or stonemason or anything, so I don't know exactly which it is, but they are all made out of the same material. However, this monument is the biggest Texas monument that I've seen at any battlefield. But here at the Railroad Redoubt, the Confederates built this work to protect the Southern Railroad of Mississippi. This is one of the 8 entry points into the city of Vicksburg, and so the Confederates built this fort here. On the morning of May 22nd, federal troops under the brigades of Brigadier General Michael Lawler and Colonel Landrum assaulted this Railroad Redoubt. The federal forces began a bombardment here at 6 a.m. That bombardment lasted for 4 hours, and a few minutes after 10 o'clock, Lawler's brigade began the assault. The bombardment, and as you can see from the signs over here, where you can see both Union and Confederate markers, knocked a breach in the Railroad Redoubt itself. Lawler had about a dozen troops that were able to kind of crawl through that breach. It was not big. They had to crawl through on their hands and knees to get inside the fort and penetrate it. The Confederate forces retreated back behind one of the embrasures here, protecting the artillery pieces, and it was a scene of close range combat. Then Edmund Pettus of I believe the 20th Alabama, Colonel Edmund Pettus at the time, led a volunteer band from Wall's Texas Legion into the breach. You couldn't get any Alabama troops to go, and so he led some Texans into the breach. They managed to seal it off and drive out and capture a bunch of the guys that got in and drive out the rest of them here. The Edmund Pettus Bridge that is in Selma, Alabama is named for him. He later became the governor of the state of Alabama. And so he was heavily involved here. If you know anything about the Vicksburg campaign, you'll know that Brigadier General Mike Lawler and his brigade of Iowans did some big damage at Big Black River Bridge just a few days prior to this. And so they were a hard-hitting set of guys. But this is the terrain that they had to traverse. The Union forces were along this ridgeline over there. Lawler's brigade of Iowans in the early morning hours got down into this ravine, which was full of water and impenetrable cane brakes, tangled vines, full of mosquitoes, and they were down there for hours before the assault began. You also had Union troops on this side of the road. You can't see it as well from where I'm standing here, but then they had to assault up this hill under murderous fire. Again, you can see kind of the steepness here of this dropping off down in there. There would have been a ditch around the outside, abattis, all kinds of stuff that they had to get through. Meanwhile, all being shot at. And you can see that there were also some artillery pieces up here that would have been firing canister. You can see there is the railroad, and that is the original railroad bed from the time of the battle. That has not changed at all. One thing you'll notice here is this fence that has been put in place. Just recently, this monument was closed for repair. They repaired the hillside there because they were worried that structurally the hillside was eroding, and they did not want this monument to fall off into the railroad bed, and so they had to do some work to repair this. And this monument is actually scheduled to be rededicated sometime this year. The governor of Texas, along with the governor of Mississippi, will be here to rededicate this monument. Anytime that the monument is repaired, the governor of that state comes to rededicate that. So the monument for Rhode Island was also damaged here during a storm. A tree fell down and it knocked the monument off its pedestal. The monument itself was not damaged, but they had to repair it. And so the governor of Rhode Island will also be here at some point this year to rededicate that monument. So that was something interesting I learned this morning. You can see off here in the distance that this is the monument for the state of Iowa. And one thing to note about that monument that is interesting, and I'll zoom in for you just a bit, is that monument was actually designed by a husband and wife with the last name of Kitson, I believe. And there's kind of two monuments in one. There is that back section that wraps around, and I believe it lists the troops, or at least the regiments that fought here that were from Iowa. And then in the front, you see the mounted soldier with the flag. The part in the back was designed by the husband. The trooper on the horse was designed by the wife. And the rumor is that they were going through a nasty divorce, or had recently gotten divorced, but they still worked together and designed many of the monuments. But she was unhappy with him, and so she stuck her monument right in front of his monument so that people would see hers first. Off here in the distance, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to see it from this vantage point, is the Kentucky Monument. And it is the other monument in the park with the Missouri Monument that memorializes troops from both the North and the South, as you had troops from both from that state that fought on both sides of the conflict. That monument has Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, as they both originally hailed from Kentucky, on that monument. And the rumor about that monument is that the designer put a penny under the heel of Jefferson Davis so that Abraham Lincoln would always be under the boot of Jefferson Davis. We are at the Railroad Redoubt, Vicksburg National Military Park.